Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Barton with Iron and Pearl Financial, and I have Jen, our money coach, with me. We are going to be talking about debt reduction strategies today. So we have a couple of topics, and Jen, as our money coach, is obviously very knowledgeable in this area. So I have a couple of questions that I'm going to send off to her today. But Jen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So as Brittany said, I am the Iron and Pearl in-house money coach, and I have spent the last 15 years of my life working in every avenue of the financial world you can possibly imagine, everything from credit counseling to high-end financial planning. And you know what? I love to talk about money, and you know what? Debt repayment is such a huge part of our lives. It seems like there is no way that you can avoid some sort of debt in your life. And just because you have debt doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You know, if you have a mortgage, that is debt. And a lot of times you can't necessarily achieve your goals without utilizing debt. The key is you utilizing it in a smart way and not letting it take over your life.
Mm-hmm. So like good debt versus bad debt.
The way that I always kind of like to, the rule of thumb for me is, are you investing in something that's going to appreciate or depreciate? So for example, if you are buying things on your credit card and you won't be able to sell them for more than you bought them for, then that's a depreciating asset. It's, you know, clothes or shoes or food or whatever. You're not going to be able to recoup your money out of it. So that's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it, I don't like the word bad debt, but it's not great debt. Another one is a car. So, you know, a lot of people will argue that a car is good debt. For me, it's a little bit on the borderline. Yes, a lot of us can't get by without a vehicle, but at the same time, there are definitely ways that you don't have to go out and buy a brand spanking new car for, you know, $30,000. You can get something perfectly serviceable that's going to cost you less and maybe not put you in so deep of a hole, because cars depreciate, unless you're talking classic cars, but that's a whole other ball of wax. Now, if you're talking about something that is going to appreciate, like you're investing in a business, so something that's going to pay you an income, you're investing in a home, you're investing in yourself, you know, like student loans, those are things that are going to pay you back over time. And so that kind of debt makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more towards that good debt, because you're going to be able to recoup what it is you put into yourself, your home, your business, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So not all debt is a bad idea.
No,
Sometimes
absolutely
it's worth
not.
it. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, myself, I, you know, went the student loan route because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to get my degree. I have a mortgage. Like, these are things that are just part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And they make the most sense. They make the most sense. I mean, waiting, I've heard people who want to wait for years and years so that they can save up as much as they can so that they can buy, you know, a small property, whatever it is. But so often I find that there isn't quite as much research done behind it on how long it takes you to grow that and whether you've invested it versus just putting it in another side account that you have. And I've heard a lot of things lately about mortgages and them not being good and trying to get away from them, but it's not always a bad idea.
It's not always the worst idea, and particularly where we live here in Victoria, BC, and, you know, quite often or anywhere in the lower mainland of Vancouver, trying to save up enough money in cash to buy a home outright would literally take, for a lot of people working in, you know, a 9-to-5 job, that would take almost their entire life to be able to save the, you know, $6, $7, $8 million. You know, like, the housing prices here are so astronomical that in order to pay for something in cash, you need to have, you know, 800,000 plus, and that's a very difficult number to save in an amount of time that would be feasible to buy a home.
I think that's a really good clarifying point. Yeah, there are so many places in Canada that are affordable to live, and where something like this, like saving large amounts of money to buy a piece of land could actually be feasible and would actually make sense. But when you're talking about some of the bigger cities like Toronto, Victoria, Vancouver, it's just not possible for most people.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can make it happen, I say power to you, go for it. I am not going to say it's a bad idea. It's just going to be exceptionally difficult.
Yep, absolutely. So for those of us who are already in debt, when we were talking about doing this conversation, I had brought up the two main kinds of or the two debt reduction strategies, the two main ones, the snowball and the avalanche. And you had brought up one that I'm really curious to know a little bit more, but I'm thinking maybe we could start on the avalanche because that's usually the one that advisors suggest.
Yeah, because with the avalanche strategy, so for anyone who is not familiar, the avalanche strategy is when you pay off your highest interest debt first. So with any of these strategies, the first step before you start figuring out who's going to get what when is you need to gather all your debts together, and you need to get a really good snapshot of what you owe, who you owe it to, what the minimum payments are, what the interest rates are. Those are the four main things you need to know about each and every single debt that you have. Without that information, you are going to be going in blind, and you could miss something that could potentially really hurt you down the road. So make sure you've got all the four pieces of information for every single one of your debts, and like take a piece of paper and write it all down and be as specific as you possibly can. A lot of people will take their debts and say, you know, oh, I owe about $2,000. Well, $2,000 is a lot different than $2,865. So try and be as exact as you possibly can to the dollar. If you don't have the pennies about that, but like try and work it out to at least the dollar or the $10 so that you are as accurate as you can with your schedule. The second thing that you want to do is you want to figure out how much that you can pay per month towards your debt. So figure out, you know, look at your monthly income, look at your expenses, figure out how much on top of that or where you can pare down and what that monthly amount is that you can reliably put towards paying down your debt. Because a lot of people will, you know, try and throw as much money as they possibly can at the debt, and then, you know, they'll have an unexpected event pop up, and then the debt creeps up, and then you end up on this crazy roller coaster, and that's not going to get anybody anywhere. The debt credit card companies love that because they make tons and tons of money off of people who do that. So, you know, if you can have a sustainable monthly amount that you're paying every single month, that's, you know, step number 2 is figuring out what that dollar amount is. So step number 3 is figuring out your game plan. And that's where these, you know, avalanches and snowballs come into effect. So as I said, avalanching is when you take the highest interest first and you tackle that. Now that's going to make it so that you are paying the least amount of interest possible over time by tackling that high interest debt first. And then once that debt is paid off completely, you take the entire payment that you were paying towards that, and then you add it to the next debt on the list with the next highest interest rate. One of the key factors here is making sure that all of your debts are having their minimum payments honored every single month. So a big mistake would be to take your whole debt repayment amount and putting it on that high interest debt and completely ignoring everything else. You want to make sure that those minimum payments are continually covered so that your credit rating doesn't take a huge dip.
Absolutely.
So, you know, over time, so essentially it works like a big avalanche. You know, you get the big guy and then it carries on to the next big one, and then, you know, you slowly work your way down the list till your debts are paid down to zero. The other strategy is a much better one, particularly if you are struggling with the mental side of debt repayment. Debt repayment can be very difficult to handle mentally because there's not a lot of quick wins. You don't feel like you're getting anywhere. You're just paying in and paying in and paying in. You're not seeing a ton of change, and it can be really mentally draining. So a snowball is great for those people who really feel like they're not getting anywhere, or they've tried before and they've failed, you know, many times. So you take your smallest debt first and you pay that off so that you get a quick win. And then you take the minimum payment from that one and you add it to the next smallest debt, pay that off. You know, you get another, probably not quite as quick, but a win. And then you just build on that. And what that does is mentally allows you to feel those victories sooner rather than trying to tackle huge, you know, potentially huge debts right off the bat and just not seeing a ton of success, you know, early in those days when you feel like you really want to see some success. And as that builds, you're going to continue to be motivated. You're going to continue to be paying off those debts to the point where, again, everything's paid down to zero. The common denominator with either one is picking a strategy and sticking to it. That is so, so important, is you got to pick a strategy and stick to it. And then the other key factor is making sure those minimum payments are made. Like, they're so important to make sure those minimum payments are made on all of your debts. So those are the two big strategies that most people talk about. The third strategy that Brittany referenced was the mental capacity debts. So the way that I like to look at it is there a debt that's keeping you up at night? Quite often these can be debts that maybe you owe to your mom or your uncle. And the rule of thumb I always like to say is, how's Christmas? You know, are they the one that, you know, you show up on Christmas, you know, for dinner, and the first thing out of their mouth is, when are you paying me back? I don't know about you, but for me, that's very mentally draining. You know, are they calling you every 5 minutes, asking you when you're going to pay them back? Quite often, those types of loans tend to be low interest, and a lot of advisors would say, like, oh, just, you know, put that on the back burner, pay it off last, kind of thing, because it's quote unquote free money. But if it's keeping you up at night and it is mentally draining for you, I say get rid of it first. So put that at the top of the list. Now, if it's a situation where, yeah, maybe you owe your mom a bit of money, but they haven't brought it up in a couple of years and they know they're not super fussed about it, then yeah, absolutely. Put them at the bottom of the pile. Make sure you pay them off, but you don't need to, you know, make a huge stink about it. But if it's something that is keeping you up and it's mentally draining, get rid of that guy first, because at the end of the day, if you're not all here and something is pulling your focus, you're going to have even harder of a time paying off your debts if you're constantly focused on something that is just out of your control. So I always say mental debts gotta come first, because I gotta take care of me. I like me.
Yep, absolutely. What I find really interesting with each one of these strategies, I suppose other than the avalanche strategy, is how much they have to do with psychology. So with the avalanche strategy, starting with the highest interest rate, I suppose, could be very inspirational for some people, but for others, we do need those quick wins and that reminder that, okay, the one credit card is paid off. We only have 5 debts now that we're focusing on. That can be a really big win. And then, of course, the mentally draining one is entirely based off of feelings and emotions and where you're at. But I find that so many conversations and so many of these strategies go right back to human instinct and how we function best, and just being honest with ourselves about what we can handle and what situations we excel in.
And I want you guys to hear what Brittany said there about being honest with yourself. Like, you really hit the nail on the head, because if you're not honest with yourself, and that can be as simple as just opening up your statements and having a look at them, because a lot of people will stick their head in the sand and go la 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 la, and I can tell you from experience that that is not a good strategy. And all that does is lead to bigger messes and bigger headaches and collection agencies and really ugly stuff. So, you know, being honest with yourself is so, so critical. And there's so much psychology that goes into this, because money is all based in our survival. Money is how we create survival in our lives. You know, it's what puts food on our table. It's what puts the roof over our head. Sorry, my phone is bouncing because my dog is shifting. But it is so based in those deep rooted instincts that you can't have money without psychology. It just doesn't function.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Being honest with yourself in where you're really at versus what you're told that you should be doing, or what somebody else is doing, or the oh so famous keeping up with the Joneses, is figuring out where you're at, being honest about it, and then picking one of these, the avalanche, the snowball, or the mentally draining debt strategies, and moving forward from there. So one of the questions that I've been asked quite often, actually, is should I pay down debt and save at the same time, or should I do one and then the other?
Well, I know what I think. Brittany, what do you think?
So I think they should be put on both at the same time, and not necessarily equally, depending on your situation, but paying off your credit card is great. Getting rid of that interest payment, if you do carry a balance on your credit card, is fantastic. But it's not going to be really helpful if in pandemic times, in crisis, we don't have the cash that we need for the cash expenses that we have, because credit can't pay for everything. I've seen ads that they claim they do, but it is not a good idea.
It can. Doesn't mean that it's a good idea. In the same sense that You can drive a car off a cliff, but it's probably not a great plan.
Right? And I mean, even for renting, when I was renting, we had some of our landlords that requested checks. And that's their preference. That's okay. We went with it. But if we didn't have cash in the bank, we can't pay it. It's great that our credit cards are cleared, but that doesn't do anything for the situation I'm in right now. So that's my take, is that you should do both at the same time, not necessarily evenly.
I completely agree. For the exact same reasons, is you never know what's coming down the pipeline. You don't know. And so a lot of the things that people, the trap they find themselves in is they throw every spare dollar at their debt, which is, it's great that they're so passionate about getting rid of the debts. The problem is when you don't see something coming and you have an emergency, the only place you have to go in that situation is those debt vehicles once again, whether it's a line of credit or an overdraft or a credit card. When the inevitable something happens in your life, because life always happens, and it may not be a global pandemic, maybe, your car breaks, maybe your hot water heater bursts, maybe your kid suddenly needs braces. Like you don't see these things necessarily coming. And unless you have some cash on hand, you're going to need to turn to those debt vehicles. And again, you're going to end up on that debt roller coaster that the credit card companies just love, because it is a cash cow for them, let me tell you.
Yeah, I think Alex brought it up earlier, but it's something that I think we don't necessarily talk about very often, is how often we do it and how easy it is to have an expense and put it on the credit card and go, I'll pay for it later. And, not everybody has emergency funds, because either they weren't aware that they're very important, or because they've used them up, or aren't able to right now. But it's just so common. I mean, the advertisements even tell us, if you're in a crisis, just put it on your credit card. It's totally fine. You don't need to worry about it. But that 19.9% interest, or whatever it is going to really bite you in the butt as you keep going.
Yeah. And here's the really, really fun thing that credit card companies don't like to tell you, is that until you pay that balance down to 0, you are charged the full 19.9% interest on your full purchase until you pay it down to 0. So you're literally paying interest on stuff. If you've been carrying a balance for like 3 years and you've been making payments and I'm getting there, you are literally paying interest on things that you bought 3 years ago to this day, until that balance is nullified, because of how the compound interest works in credit cards. So if you've never looked into how interest is charged on your credit card, I would strongly encourage you to go and have a look at that fine print, or that maybe a future video of ours. I feel like there's some interesting subject matter there, because it's not well understood that you are literally paying interest on every single purchase you make, compounding on itself. So it's growing on itself until it's paid down to 0. So that can add up very quickly and can cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting is if we flip that, like, we're so easy to do it with our debts, and we don't realize the compounding interest on our debt. We also don't realize that when we invest and we get a compounding interest account, that the exact same concept happens, but for your benefit.
Yeah. It's a powerful, powerful thing. Compound interest is so, so powerful, because that is what leads to exponential growth. And it can be used against you, or it can be used for you. So definitely, get your head wrapped around that concept. It's not an easy one to kind of grasp. It takes a little bit of time, but once you get it, there is this beautiful aha moment that, you can just really ride out and use it to your benefit. Get those investments going and make sure that money is building on itself and working for you.
Yeah. We've been doing it for years now with each of our accounts, making sure that they're compounding interest accounts, because not all of them are. But the benefit that we've seen, the small amount of money that we put into it compared to the very large gains that we're still able to make, is incredible. Like last year, our average interest rate was 13%.
Yeah.
Which, that's really good. This year, it's not going to be that worse.
Well,
that's okay. I'm riding on last year.
This year's kind of a dumpster fire, so
yeah. spectacular one. But it's amazing how quickly it works. And I think it's really important to clarify that it can work for you and it can work against you.
Absolutely.
You just need to understand it.
Yeah, totally. You nailed it.
So the last question that I have on here has to do with consolidating your debt. So it's a question that I've been asked. It's a question that I have debated myself, is consolidating your debt. So let's say we're remortgaging, just because it's a really easy example. If I'm remortgaging and I have a line of credit and I have a credit card and I'm wanting to consolidate all of that in my mortgage, is that actually a good idea? What kinds of things should people be wary about? I know I have a few ideas. I would love to hear your take on it too.
I think it depends on where the debt came from. I think that that's the first and most important factor. Is it a habitual thing where you are spending a little bit more recklessly and you're just looking for a way to kind of make the debt go away, quote unquote? Because if that's the case, then okay, yeah, you remortgage it back into your mortgage and it, gets absorbed there. And, usually what ends up happening is 6 months to a year down the road, you're in the same spot because you haven't changed your habits. You haven't changed your lifestyle. All you've done is put a Band-Aid on it and eaten away at the equity in your home. So, if that's the case, then probably not the best idea. Then maybe you need to look at some other strategies to try and alter your spending habits that will take you to a place where you're no longer needing to remortgage. Now, if you're in a situation where maybe you had like an emergency, for example, we had a flood in December and we had literally have spent the last 9 months redoing our basement. That's not an habitual thing. Let me tell you, I'm not planning on doing that again anytime soon. So if you're in a situation like that and you've maybe eaten up your, cushion line of credit and your mortgage is coming up for refinance soon, that would possibly be a lot more useful of a time to utilize that strategy, because it's not something you're going to be doing all the time. It's a one-time, life happens situation. And you're probably going to end up paying less interest if it's rolled into your mortgage than if you were to leave it, say, in your line of credit. And like I said, it's not something that's probably going to happen again anytime soon. Hopefully, if you're like us, you fix the problem and you won't have any more floods.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So those are kind of my two thoughts on the subject. I really think it depends on the individual. I really think it depends on the situation. And I think a conversation with both a qualified mortgage broker and a financial professional would be beneficial before diving in either way.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I completely agree with you. One of the things that I would add to it is keeping in mind, especially, or rather going back to what you were saying about your habits, and if you have a spending habit or if you have reoccurring habits that are being put on your credit card and not being paid off, it can be easy to just stay in that. And then what's to say that consolidating your debt isn't just going to give you space to make more debt? So it's really easy once you have the credit card and the line of credit and all these other things technically paid off. That's what it can look like. But when it's just put into another debt source, it can make it really easy to open those back up. It can make it really easy to go, well, we have a little bit of extra money. Let's upgrade the TV. Why not? Not realizing that it's just been moved over like that. We don't have that satisfaction in our minds of paying it off. We've kind of just taken that instant gratification, even though we didn't really deserve it. I know I've done that myself. I put everything into one area, put my debt into one area. It was just a small amount to open up another credit card, thinking that I paid it off. It's fine. I'm doing good. I don't have the interest rate. And then something happened. And then I wanted something. And then it was Christmas. And all of a sudden that credit card is racked back up again. And I still have the other debt that I moved it to. And now I'm just doubly in the hole.
Now you're doubly in the hole as opposed to just in the hole.
Exactly. And it's really easy to do. But yeah, again, goes back to just your habits and knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. And I think also being honest with your budget, like actually going through it and knowing how much you're spending, knowing how much you're making and what your numbers look like. Because if you don't know if you're making ends meet technically at the end of the month, then yeah, that's a big problem. That adds up really quickly.
Yeah. So knowing your numbers is so important. And I really, this has come up many, many times in many different conversations, that at the end of the day, it comes down to paying attention. are you paying attention or are you ignoring it? Because if you're paying attention, then chances are you're going to catch some of these things that you maybe miss if you are just blindly spending. And that can be, whether, you're blindly overspending or not. It's just paying attention is so, so critical.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just going to throw one more question at you because I was thinking
Sure.
about it as you were talking. For somebody who, like, let's say they're, 19, 20 years old, they're getting their first credit card and they want to make sure that they don't end up in debt because they've seen it happen. Obviously, most of our parents have experienced the exact same thing, and they haven't necessarily learned the lessons on how to do it better. And so we haven't necessarily learned the lessons. So what can we do better for that person who doesn't want to end up in debt and doesn't necessarily have the best role model or knowledge about it?
First thing, like you and I were just saying, pay attention. So pay attention to that credit card, to that 19 or 20-year-old, go out, get the credit card. I am not going to say don't get it because you can't build credit without it. And without credit, there are so many things that you literally cannot do as an adult, particularly, like we were saying earlier about living in these high expense cities where if you want to buy a home, a mortgage is pretty much your only option. So go out, get the credit card. And, the rule of thumb, everyone always says, oh, be responsible. But what does that actually mean? Like, what is being responsible with your credit card? So what I would like to recommend to anybody who is new to credit is pay it off weekly. So don't wait a month. A month is a long time and you can rack up so much in a month. Oh my gosh, I can't, even if you're just using it for the odd coffee here or a couple groceries there, you can suddenly, have a balance of like $500, $600, $700, $800 and be like, what did I buy? Do you know how many times I've heard people say, what did I buy? So whereas 7 days is a lot more bite size. So if you make an appointment in your calendar, like literally put it in your calendar, set a reminder that's going to go bing, bing, ding, be annoying on your phone that says pay off your credit card, and do it every single week so that it's top of mind. It's always part of your consciousness, and you will start to develop those habits, those instincts on, what's happening with your money, where it's at. Or if you're really, really nervous, check it daily. Like literally make it part of your morning routine. When you're checking your email, check your balances. It's really easy. Most of these things have apps on your phone. You can just quickly log in. What's the balance? Where am I at? Do I have enough cash to cover it? The more you pay attention, the better you're going to be with managing your debt.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be a big deal. Like it doesn't have to be a big production. It can literally be first thing in the morning, you roll over, you're blurry eyed, you check. I don't know about you, but I personally check my emails first thing I do. And I know it's not healthy, but that's what I do. And then after I finish checking my email, I log into my banking app. And that is the first thing I do every single day. And it takes me all of 18 seconds. So it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just work it into your habits, work it into your daily routines so that it's not a big oh my God, I have to open my credit card bill at the end of the month. That's really scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Even for my banking, I get a text every morning of what the balance that's in my bank account. And if it's not exactly what I thought it was going to be, then I log in and I figure out what went wrong, what bill was paid, what was refunded or whatever else. And then I've started, because I started doing the same thing. I was told that if you leave a balance on your credit card and you only pay it off once a month, then your credit builds faster and it's better, which I mean, in theory could be true, but if it's, if you're not able to stay on top of it and you're losing track of purchases, well, then that theory goes out the window pretty darn quickly.
Yeah. And, one of the things that you have to understand with credit is if you get a credit card and then stick in your wallet and never use it, that's not a terribly good use of credit, because what credit is, your credit score is a reflection of how well you pay off your debt. So you have to accumulate some debt and pay it off in order to have a high credit score. So you want to use your card, but you want to stay on top of it. So, paying that balance down every single week is going to create a history that your creditors are going to be like, yeah, this person pays off their debts. Like that is who you want to be known as in the credit world, as someone who pays your debts. You don't necessarily want to be that guy who, oh, right, yeah, I haven't paid that in 3 months. Nobody wants to lend money to that guy.
No, no, it ends up shooting you in the foot down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think this was really helpful, Jen. I actually learned a few things from this, got a few new tips from you, so thank you.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, this is good. I think debt reduction is a really important thing to be talking about, especially from the beginning angles of, how did you get into debt? Why are you still in debt? And what's going to work for you to get out of it? I think those are three really important questions and steps to go through. So I'm glad that we were able to touch on them all today.
Great.
Awesome. And so for everybody seeing this, if you're looking for more help with your finances, you want a little bit more guidance, Jen and I have both made videos on ironandpearl.ca/videos. You'll be able to see some of our tips and some of the other advice that we give around this. So thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll just cut the thing here.